2023 was an awesome reading year. I didn't read anything I would rate less than 3.5 stars. Welcome to Matt on Books, where I talk about fantasy mostly, science fiction sometimes, and comics occasionally. If you know the channel and you know me at all, you know I don't really care at all about stars. I care much more about why an enjoyable book was enjoyable. So instead of some kind of meaningless ranking, which is probably better for the algorithm, I have a number of awards which tell you something about the book itself. But of course, when it comes down to it, there must be a Book of the Year award. And yes, there is. Friends of the channel can no doubt already guess what it is. I'm not a huge fan of rules, especially invented, self-imposed ones. So in these awards, I have included books I read for the first time, books I reread. I'm allowing books to win multiple awards because some of them really are just that damn good. I'm putting in standalones and I'm putting in series. Basically, anything I want. As you know, likes, subs, and shares really help the channel out. Let's get right into it, shall we? Magicalest. This was actually a really close one. I have mentioned on the channel before, I'm much more of a fan of magic that feels magic, not magic that feels like science. So I guess what the kids today call soft magic systems. It was a toss-up between two series for me. One is The Live Ship Traders by Robin Hobb. I read that this year. It was a reread. And in Live Ships, the world, the Six Duchies, is not a super magic world. It feels very medieval, but there are some sort of not super common magic systems. But the thing that was most magical about the Live Ship Traders specifically is the live ships themselves. If you haven't read the series, the live ships are ships that are carved out of a mysterious kind of wood, and they are sentient. The figurehead on the ship can move and speak, and one of the main characters of the series is actually one of these ships. And that's a pretty damn cool idea. If you haven't read Live Ships, do it. It's the second... Fitz! It's the second trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings, so please read the Farseer trilogy first. But Live Ship is so good. However, maybe because Live Ships pops up elsewhere on this list, I'm giving the Magicalest award to the Long Price Quartet. It's a really interesting idea and so different than magic I've seen anywhere else. Basically, the main manifestation of magic in the world of the Long Price Quartet is there are poets who can write a poem which is very hard work, which causes a concept to incarnate. Sounds weird. So they write a poem. If they're successful, they do it the right way, they end up with an actual being which personifies and has the power of a particular concept. The main one in the first book, which is the only one I've read so far, is called Seedless. And Seedless is primarily used to remove the seeds from cotton. It sounds kind of boring, but it's an economic advantage that makes the city where the story happens in the first book an extremely wealthy city. So this idea of creating through language a being which incarnates a concept just totally blew my mind. Therefore, Magicalest. Worldbuildingest. I say it at the beginning of almost every video, science fiction sometimes. And in this case, it was a hands-down science fiction award for the most amazing world building. That goes to Terra Ignota, the 4-book series, the tetralogy by Ada Palmer. It's a really interesting view of the future. It's on the surface a utopian sounding future. There are no nations. People choose their citizenship, and the citizenship they belong to has much more to do with an idea or a philosophy or a lifestyle choice than it does any kind of location. But there's a dark and somewhat rotten underbelly to all of this world building. It's a believable science fiction world. Sometimes science fiction gets into the realm of could almost be magic. It's so different. The most magic technology probably that exists in this world are really, really fast flying cars, which makes the whole world feel much smaller. She's obviously thought a hell of a lot about the sociological impact of a lot of the changes that she's suggesting. And she's got an interesting history, how the world got there. It kind of blew my mind. It was really, really fresh and original and different from anything else I'd ever read before in science fiction or elsewhere. So Terra Ignota is definitely the world-buildingest thing I read in 2023. Finest wine. The Finest Wine Award goes to a book that is older and has aged well, and that I've read before and was just as enjoyable on a reread as it was the first and actually second and maybe third time. This being, I think, the fourth time I've read The Live Ship Traders. It's such a good series. It's a trilogy. It belongs in the realm of the Elderlings, which is 16 books, blah, blah, blah. Live Ships is an amazing trilogy with lots of different characters, lots of different POVs. The camera, so to speak, jumps around between different characters. Different stories developing at the same time, kind of in parallel, which all kind of come together at the end. It's got some amazing creatures and the ecology of these creatures. And it's got the ships that I already mentioned, which are just a super magical, interesting idea. It's definitely a fine wine. Coziest. Cozy is a kind of writing or a style or an aesthetic that I have smugly and arrogantly looked down my nose at for a long time. I thought that people reading Legends and Lattes were probably a bit soft in the head. I don't know why I decided to audiobook a definitely cozy book this year, and I ended up really enjoying it. And I can totally understand why people, especially with the pandemic and the way the world is and the way things are changing, I can totally understand wanting a book that is just a feel-good book and cozy. I read A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. It was surprisingly interesting to me. I was expecting not to like it because I had this preconception about cozy, and it was charming. Maybe it helps that I'm a Buddhist and the main character is a Buddhist monk, or a Buddhist-ish monk. It's actually a tea monk. It's a world where humanity developed with robots, and the robots got more and more complex up until they achieved sentience or consciousness of a sort. And all of the robots decided together that they didn't want to be part of human society anymore, and they moved off into the wilderness. And human society was bizarrely well developed and mature and sensible, and let them do it. So humans haven't seen robots in a long time. And then a robot wanders out of the wilderness, meets a tea monk, and becomes an ambassador of a sort from the robots back to the humans. And it's surprisingly philosophical. There's a lot of really interesting things to think about in the book, but it's just charming and cozy, and I really enjoyed it. Surprise, surprise. Love Hateablest. This isn't for the most lovable and or hateable book. It's for the most lovable and hateable characters in a book. And again, this one, hands down, no runners up, goes to Live Ship Traders. I have never wanted to punch a character in the throat as much as two particular characters in this book. I have never been more choked up about what happened to characters I love than some characters in this book. The only books that come close are other Robin Hobb books with Fitz and the Fool in them. Hobb even managed to make me feel extreme emotions for a ship. A sentient talking ship, but a ship nonetheless. It's such a good book. It's full of so many questionable characters. It's full of so many flawed characters that you love. It's even got a character who, at the same time, is probably the character in fantasy that I want most to punch in the throat, and that I most want to hug and introduce to a therapist. Grimmest Dark. For the Grimmest Dark, or Grim Darkest thing I read in 2023, I was going back and forth a lot, and I was thinking, I have to decide on one of these two books. And then it occurred to me, these are actually my book awards, so I don't have to decide that at all. They can both win this award. I'm giving this to The War for the Rose Throne by Peter McLean, which is a tetralogy, and Elric of Melniboné. I only read the first book, reread the first book this year. There are numerous others, and I will be reading them in 2024 and onwards. But these are both what I would call grim and dark in very different ways. The War for the Rose Throne, the world is very gritty. It is basically late medieval, or even after a bit post-medieval, European-ish, but with magic. But it's a very dark world. People knife each other constantly. There's quite a lot of hacking and bleeding and that kind of thing. And it follows around a character, Thomas Piety, who is at the same time a priest and an organized crime boss. So it's got a lot of very grim themes in it and subjects, and there's all sorts of pretty dark stuff going on. Elric of Melniboné, I won't say too much about. I just recently did a video. I'll put it up here. Suffice it to say, addiction, slavery, torture, soul-drinking sword, that's all pretty grim and dark. Prettiest. Here I'm not talking about the prettiest characters or the prettiest story or even the prettiest author. I'm talking about the prettiest cover. This is also a hands down, no competition and kind of award. It goes to The Spear Cuts Through Water. It's a gorgeous cover. I love the way the illustration is integrated with the typography. I love that it's not just a big picture of the main character or characters. They are on the cover, but pretty small, and the rest of it is quite symbolic and suggestive, but it's not 100% clear what. I think it's an amazing use of color. It's just a gorgeous cover, and it definitely deserves this award. Nothing else even came close. Indie-est. Here I don't mean the most indie, but I wanted to have a category to emphasize some indie books. There is still a weird kind of snobbery about indie or self-pub books out there, which I find kind of hilarious and pretty easy to objectively prove wrong. There are some amazing indie books out there. There are a lot of really horrible trad pub books out there. There are also a lot of horrible indie books out there. But maintaining that indie is less than trad pub just isn't right. It's kind of stupid. So I wanted to emphasize a couple of indie books and maybe pop up the best one that I read. I read a few in 2023, and actually I think 2023 was the first year that I read any self-pub books, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I also had this sort of snobbish attitude that, of course, trad pub is always better and indie has got to be always worse. And I was happy to be proven extremely wrong. The runners-up for this award are Vaughan Roycroft's The Severing Sun, which is a historical feeling. He's obviously, and I mean, he has said this, he's obviously leaning on a lot of historical things. It's a tribal story. It's a father-son story. It's a chosen one becoming a hero story. And Vaughan stands very firmly in the old school fantasy background, which we have in common, and is a super nice guy. And the book was really enjoyable. I've got Bold Ascension, the next book, and I'm looking forward to see where it goes. But didn't win this award. Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. What a fun, but also creepy and slightly on the horror side almost book. There is the creepiest child in fantasy literature. There are a lot of heroes that reminded me a lot. I don't know if you'll know this, but there was an old school wuxia series called Monkey.
Elemental forces caused the egg to hatch. From it then came a stone monkey. The nature of monkey was irrepressible. I love to fight! Born from an egg on the mountains up.
Which I watched when I was a kid. And this reminded me of that. It's a motley crew of strange heroes on a strange quest. And it was really, really enjoyable. I did a review a while back for The Way of Adan. I really enjoyed Philip Chase, my friend Philip Chase, his first book. I haven't read the rest yet. I have them on my shelf. I will definitely get to them, I hope in 2024. But this was very much a setup book. It was introducing lots and lots of new things. And because of that, maybe it wasn't quite enough to win this award, but I really enjoyed it. There's an interesting idea about magic in it. There is a lot going on with religion, which is one of my favorite subjects, even though I try not to talk to people about it because people can get very upset about religion very easily. Philip also comes from the old school fantasy background that I mentioned with Von Roycroft. This is something that the three of us have talked about and have in common. So Philip has said that he basically became an author and a literature professor and medievalist because he wanted to more or less be J.R.R. Tolkien. And it shows in his work. And I love Tolkien, so I ended up loving his book. However, the Indie-est award goes to The Bloodstones by Tori Tekken. I did a review for this as well. I did an interview with Tori. I really enjoyed this book. It's also a setup book, but maybe it was a little more focused and not covering quite as much ground as The Way of Adan was. So it grabbed me a little more viscerally. It's mainly focused on two young characters as they're growing up in two different cultures. Obviously, they're going to come together in later books. That will be a blast. I look forward to seeing it. And that was the main thing that got me more than any of the other indie books. Is at the end of it, I was like, okay, what next? I wanted to read the next book immediately. Unfortunately, Tori hasn't written it yet, but we're being patient and giving her time. I am so looking forward to The Queen's Wolf, the next book. Surprisingest. I really love it when a book comes kind of out of nowhere and does something that I wasn't expecting, that maybe I haven't seen before, that really surprises me. And this year, hands down, nothing surprised me more than The Spear Cuts Through Water. It's so different in its structure. It's so different in its voice and the kind of story it's telling. It has, as far as the world, it has a very wuxia-ish feeling, but not only that, because it's numerous stories nested within stories. And there's a maybe modern character who is telling a tale, and then we go into that tale, which has a tale in it, and so on and so forth. It sounds like it's maybe confusing and difficult. It is not at all. I kept expecting that maybe it would eventually get to the point where I would be lost. But no matter how many nested stories, I think I counted 6 levels at one point, I never got lost. And it was always clear who was speaking, what was going on. And it's a super interesting book. It completely surprised me, therefore, this award. Downest Letdown. If you've been around the channel for a while, you know that I don't really talk negative very much. And I guess this one is also not just the Downest Letdown, but maybe the FOMOest. I read Jade City, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I was super interested and invested in the characters. I thought the idea of magic in the world was super interesting. I loved the family dynamics. I loved the action. I loved all of it. Then I got to Jade War, and Jade War is a bunch of people talking for 80-90% of the book. And Kyle on the Discord pointed out to me that I am a huge Robin Hobb fan, so I cannot have a problem with people just sitting around and talking. And he was right. The problem was they were sitting around talking about things I didn't care about and I wasn't interested in. And I pushed myself to not DNF Jade War, but I have the feeling that I do not want to continue with Jade Legacy, which is a pity because almost everybody I know loves it. And for me, it was one of the low points of the year. It's not that it's badly written or anything like that. It's just the subject matter failed to engage me. I wasn't excited or curious or interested in all of the socio-political, economic stuff going on. It just went past me and I didn't really care much. Sharpest, short. I mentioned it at some point this year. I have bought a bunch of short story collections. I think short stories are a really nice palate cleanser, nice thing to stick in between other books. Maybe read 2-3 short stories and then start a new book the next day, that kind of thing. The one that blew me away this year was The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. First of all, there's a short story collection, which is all Ken Liu short stories. The book is called Paper Menagerie, but one of the stories in it is called Paper Menagerie. It's primarily a family story, also an immigrant story, and it really touched me. It has a really interesting magical-ish idea going on in it. It's a super charming story, and the whole book, The Paper Menagerie, I can heartily recommend. There are lots and lots of different stories in there. Very different in tone and very different in style. Some of them are more fantasy, some of them are more normal world-ish. A couple are science fiction as well. But that specific one story, The Paper Menagerie, was so good. Re-readablest. This is maybe the only award that actually did have a bit more of a rule in it, because the award itself doesn't make much sense if it's a book I've already read. The idea here is it's a book I read for the first time this year that when I finished it, or even before I finished it, I thought I am going to reread this, probably more than once. The runner-up, this one was hard to decide, but the runner-up is The Spear Cuts Through Water. The Spear is definitely a book I want to reread, but it took a while to sink in. After I finished it, I was sitting around afterwards and I thought, yeah, actually, you know, that was really good. And I think I would get a lot out of it if I reread it. However, before even getting to the halfway point of Something Wicked This Way Comes, I was already knowing that I was going to reread it. I decided before I'd finished it to buy the Folio Society edition, which I did. And damn, it's yellow. And I know that I will read Something Wicked again. I know that I will probably reread it every few years for the rest of my life. It's such a charming story. There is so much interesting family stuff going on in there. It conveys the idea so well of being a boy, running around, doing things you know you shouldn't, being curious, being adventurous, exploring the world, figuring out how far you can go without serious consequences. There were so many things I loved in Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury that I know I will read it over and over and over. What the fuckest. Not only in 2023, but perhaps in my entire reading history. I don't know if there's a more what the fuck book than The Book of the New Sun, which is actually a tetralogy, 4 books. I read it this year. I kind of buddy read it with Philip Chase and Paul Williams, of course. It's a book that feels a lot like a dream. Almost nothing is laid out clearly in front of you. There are so many things where you have to pick up a hint there and pick up a hint there and put them together and they become a hint to something else. And there's a whole bunch of dangling threads left at the end of the book. But it's also a book, it's one of those books that makes you feel smarter. It sometimes makes you feel dumb as well, where you're just like, I know something's going on here and I don't get it. But it also made me feel smarter often, because I was thinking, I know there's something going on here that I don't get, but wait a sec, I get that and I get that. And if I put those together, now I get it. There's a lot of things to figure out. It feels like a mystery. It feels like a dream mystery. And it's a very strange book, but so enjoyable. 2023 Book of the Year. No matter how weird and made up my awards are, there still has to be a Book of the Year award. And there can be only one. One book to rule them all. One book to find them. One book to bring them all. And in this video, bind them. Honestly, this one was not at all hard to decide. And if you've been following the channel at all for a while, you're probably already clear on what it was. For this one, there are 2 rules. Only single books, and only, not standalones, but single books, and only books that were new to me. No rereads, which makes it a little harder because I reread quite a lot this year. The nominees are Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, Too Like the Lightning by Ada Palmer, Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, and The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. All four of these books were super enjoyable. Two Like the Lightning introduces a tetralogy that I have come to love, and I'm sure I will reread at some point because there's a lot going on. Piranesi was just a bizarre, original idea that really kind of blew my mind and was short and super easy to read. Something Wicked This Way Comes I've already talked a little bit about, and The Spear Cuts Through Water I've also mentioned a little. All four of these were so good, and pretty much all books that I'm sure I will reread at some point. But it's the book of the year, not the books of the year, so there really can be only one. The 2023 Mad on Books Book of the Year is The Spear Cuts Through Water. The one that was the most exciting, the most surprising, the most creative out of all of those four was definitely The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It's a standalone, which is a nice break. Sometimes when you read a lot of huge fantasy and science fiction series, it's so original in its structure. The characters are so interesting. The feeling of the whole thing is a bit dreamlike or mythological, and the structure of stories folded into stories that contain stories is super interesting. If everybody read this, I would be extremely happy and feel like my mission was accomplished and I could just shut down the channel. Seriously. Read The Spear Cuts Through Water. That's it for 2023. How was your reading year? Let me know down in the comments. What was your favorite book? Or maybe your top 3 or your top 10 if you're feeling cheeky. As always, I hope you're well. I hope you're reading awesome books, and I hope you've got awesome books lined up for 2024. And I will see you next time.